I'm back. Welcome back to the new and improved version of the Boujee Boss podcast, where we are now redefining luxury for women. We're ready to ditch the hard life and step into their soft states of being. Y'all, I'm so excited to be back. I can't believe it's been this long. As I'm filming this, it's currently Halloween night. Spooky, I know. It's been so good to be back in front of the camera again, back on the mic again. There's so many updates I have to share. I was keeping up while I was gone, like with the stats and stuff, and so many new listeners and supporters all around the world. Shout out to you guys. But for the OGs who've been around or people who tuned in while I was out, want to know where I've been, what I've been up to, girl, there's updates. I'm sure you see some of the changes already. So we got to get into all of that. All right. So much. So as we dive in, might as well, introduce one of our new changes. We've got segments now, which I'll speak to a little bit later, but let's get into this next segment. It's called Boujee Bites. For the OGs that have been watching on the YouTube channel, you may recognize the term Boujee Bites. We used to have it as kind of like a secondary post on the YouTube channel throughout the week, but now we've redefined it, restructured it to actually be incorporated as a segment within our actual podcast episodes. So let's get into it a little bit. So for this week's Boujee Bites, today on January 5th is actually National Screenwriters Day. So just for context, y'all know I got my trusty notes here. I'm going to read a little definition here. National Screenwriters Day is celebrated in recognition of the writers who toll day and night to bring us the best stories, the ultimate zingers, and sublime messages that steer our conscience. And so I figured in the name of the day, right, I'd name a few of my own favorite screenwriters. So, of course, she's like an OG, especially for my generation, Mara Brock Akil, which, you may not know that name, but she's behind some of the most iconic, like, Black programs, especially. She's behind Girlfriend, she's behind The Game, Being Mary Jane, Love Is, like, that's just to name a few. Her and her husband, they're definitely some big heavyweights, and I know that, like, all of those things I just named have had an impact on me as a creative, and so I definitely wanted to shout her out. Another favorite, of course, Miss Issa Rae, like, come on. Insecure, we've got the new stuff with Rap Shit, we've got OG back in the day, Awkward Black Girl, come on, Humble Beginnings. Like, she is just such a visionary, and to see how the way that she's transcended is like super inspirational to me. And so I had to shout her out as well. Another favorite, Quinta Brunson, come on. Abbott Elementary, come on. BuzzFeed, okay, come on, he got money, okay. I love her so much. I'm so happy to see. It's always great when you can see underdogs like just really take over and dominate, and to watch them like glow up in the way that she's been using her platform to elevate, the platforms of other people around her, not just, people who are new coming in behind her, but even those that have come before her, but don't get, the appreciation that they should be given. Shout out to you, Miss Cheryl Lee Ralph. Okay. So it's really dope to see her like putting on such quality writing, such quality scripts. Obviously, like Abbott Elementary, it's been compared to the likes of The Office, and anybody who knows me knows that The Office is one of my favorite shows. I definitely see the similarities, but I also see that it's creating its own lane, and I love how just positive it is. Like, we need to see this type of content on our television screens, and so it's really great to see her winning. Another personal favorite, Andrea Lewis, you guys may know or remember, she was actually a guest on last season of the podcast. I'll link it in the bio. We don't have episodes anymore. That's another change. We've got seasons now. But yeah, like she's got this series called Black Actress. You can watch most of it on YouTube, actually. I mean, I think they started that series probably close to 10 years ago now, like 2012, 2013 or something like that. And it details the life of a Black actress. It features a lot of Black actresses in the industry. I feel like it's great writing. It's great content. And I'm super excited for Andrea. Like, she was so sweet when she was on. She dropped so many amazing gems for us to take heed to. So shout out to you, girl. I'm super excited to see everything that you've got coming on. And then, just a little retrospective, I guess I'm like future pacing here. I'd like to throw my own hat in the ring because, I think I'm a bomb writer and I'm working on some stuff, hint, that's coming down the line. And, I just got to put it out in the atmosphere, like, surround yourself with the greats and you too will be great, right? Something along those lines. So I just had to shout all of those out. That's the Boujee Bite for today. Now we got to get into a little bit of Boujee business, if you know what I'm saying.
Shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Kai Blends, an all natural, for real y'all, hair care line. The CEO and lead chemist also happens to be our creative director, Shanice Thompson. The brand was inspired by the birth of a daughter, Kyla May, where they experienced cradle cap and postpartum hair loss. Shanice couldn't find products to solve their hair dilemmas, and thus Kai Blends was born. Signature products include the Honey Blossom Mask, FoliGuard, Sunshine Growth Oil, and Soul Sorrel Deep Conditioner. Listen, I've been using most of these products for over a year now, and I'm telling you, as a lazy natural, they're easy to use, they smell amazing, and they work wonders for your hair. Kai Blends also assisted with the hairstyling for the video component of this season of the Boujee Boss podcast, which honestly, bless it, thank you so much. You can visit kaiblends.com to buy. Thanks again to Shanice and the Kai Blends team for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back to it.
All right, let's get into the meat of today's episode, really diving into this journey and this little brand called Boujee Boss Media. You see, I had to put on my spectacles. For those that don't know, I'm a little blind, just a little bit. And so I had to put this on. All these lights and whatnot is getting to me. Man, okay. This journey has been like 4 to 5 years in the making, I want to say. A long time in the making. The phrase like Boujee Boss Media first popped into my head, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago. But like a lot of things, which I've noticed, like a lot of my ideas, they end up being these like phrases or concepts that pop up in my head that I don't know exactly how they are supposed to be used. So I end up tabling it, and then it always circles back around the block like a couple years later. And so this was one of those things. Now, obviously, the Boujee Boss podcast launched in August of 2020, but I didn't have like a clear brand identity at the time. I've talked about that so much because I was just figuring out my place as an entrepreneur and a creative. And so like the first year of the podcast, especially, as you guys have seen, was very, very experimental. And then of course this year by the time you watch this will be 2023. So last year in 2022, April of 2022 exact, I followed one of my lifelong dreams. I moved to New York City, and obviously I found a lot of inspiration, right? So, literally, I like not even 2 weeks after I moved, like it was the beginning of May when that phrase "Boujee Boss Media" popped back up in my head. And like many previous occasions, I wanted to take immediate action in sharing it. And so y'all, like I outlined an announcement video. I had a cheap logo made. Like I planned to go public with it and share all that. I wanted like around Memorial Day weekend, I want to say. And then, I just felt this super big urge to just halt all progress. And I've talked about before, like feeling unaligned or feeling misaligned, but I never experienced this before, to where like it was just such a big pull, like just stop, not slow down, not like take a moment to reflect, just stop. And in that moment when I just stopped and just listened, it was this rare moment of brutal honesty. And I realized that I have never experienced adulthood or life as a creative without the pressures of creating, if that makes sense. Like I've always been working on a new platform or a new business offer or some other new project. And when I would announce brief breaks from these things, like it was never truly a break because I was always settling or working on something else. And here I am, I've just accomplished this lifelong dream, and I wasn't even giving myself the grace or the space to really enjoy it because I was so focused on what I had to do next and everything that was on my list or whatever. And then you add in the fact that most of these said projects were misaligned, and you can kind of get an idea of how burnt out I was, right? But then, God, like he really helped me realize that the burnout that I was experiencing, it was calling for more than just another brief break, right? Like it called for this extended period of reflection and solitude. And I realized that the only solution to the misalignment that I was experiencing would be on the other side of this time away. And so I answered that call. I made the hard decision to step away from my brands indefinitely because when I felt the urge to like step back, I didn't know like or have an idea of how long I would be away. I just knew I needed to be away for more than just a couple weeks or more than a month, or like it was going to take some time, and I didn't know what that meant, and it was very scary, but I just felt this urge to do that. And man, the moment that I finally acknowledged and admitted to myself that this is what was required, it was so humbling because I did not realize just how much, it may be hard to believe, but I didn't realize just how much my identity was wrapped up in the titles that I carried and all of these little projects that I was creating. But there was something that was deep inside of me that knew that I had to take this drastic step for various reasons. Of course, being like what I just talked about, I needed clarity on my brand's purpose. Two, I deserve a carefree hot girl city or hot girl summer in the city. Enough said. Okay. And then three, I had this urge, like, it was a season of rest and clarity, but it also was a season of preparation in a sense, because I just had this feeling of like this period would be the final chapter of my life as I knew it. And so I needed to go out with a bang, and I needed to be present in that moment. And so with that in mind, I allowed myself to live. And I spoke about this in the episode at the end of 2021, talking about the year 2021 being the year of permission and how I was starting to allow myself to live. It was like that on steroids. Like it was crazy. I allowed myself to go out to eat without rushing back to outline an episode, or I allow myself to binge Netflix, which oh my gosh, I barely watch TV anymore. But I allowed myself to binge Netflix without guilting myself for not updating my back-end systems. And, I allowed myself to lurk, child, without, comparisons to people who aren't even in my lane. I'm gonna get to that in a second. But, I allowed myself to do these things. And as you would imagine, the tides started turning, the shifts started taking place, right? And the clarity came. And the vision, it felt attainable. And the next phase of my life, it started unfolding before my eyes. And now it's like I felt like I had the proper tools to really like bring it to fruition, to really like see it through, to make it real. And it's funny because I like watch, a lot of like interviews with people I admire, especially like creators and writers and such. And I remember watching this interview with Eminem, and he was talking about how like he always carries like a pen and pad with him, so that like if he has any ideas or lines or whatever, he can write it down and doesn't lose them. And my notes app on my phone, insert here, takes that form for me. I do also like to physically write stuff around, so I have like a gazillion notepads and sticky tabs and all the things. But I also, like it's very convenient just to have the notes app. Like literally there's $1 billion in my notes app, I promise. And so I would literally find myself waking up out of the blue
and purging these like full business models, like content offers, like into that app. I'm telling y'all, at random, it was crazy. Like ideas that had been stagnant for years were literally resolved within seconds. It was just the creative spurts were insane. And I knew I was ready to start again. Guys. And so now we getting into the emergence. Of Boujee Boss Media. I'm excited. You get excited. I'm excited. And so I knew that the first thing I had to analyze and was look at what I had already created. I need to see, okay, what do I keep? What do I rework? What do I remove? And so in terms of keeps, like there were like a couple back-end systems that I formulated specifically around the podcast, that I knew I could probably keep. They were pretty solid. In terms of reworking, there was a lot of that. Obviously, even though I kept some of the back-end processes, like this whole format has changed, as you can see, so reworking all of that. The old website, KhalaSimmons.com, it's not live anymore. It's no longer, I still own the domain, but it's no longer like in existence technically. You can't go visit it anymore. So yeah, girl, sorry about that. But it'll be back soon. But before I took it down, I reworked it into more of like a production portfolio website for like my 9-to-5 career. And but yeah, like it'll be back, but that's not really relevant to the conversation. Well, no, it is relevant because that was like my main platform. Because before, like I was going back and forth on whether I wanted to like just try to like build on that brand and kind of just like use the same materials and just like introduce new stuff, but it just wasn't working. Like it didn't make sense. And so yeah, like that was one of the things I knew I had to rework. And then of course, like the paid offers, I knew like I would have to rework and then remove everything else. Okay. And so when it comes to the podcast, circling back to that, I knew I wanted to up-level the production process. I wanted to be more intentional with the content that I created, with the guests that I invited. And that required me to really like pivot and reassess the show's positioning. And so as it was, like, as you guys who've been around before know, the podcast, it was continuous. And there were 3 main sectors. It was self-development, career, relationships. Those were the 3 sectors. And then there was like just like this random slew of guests and topics, nothing in particular, no sort of theme or anything like that. And so to provide more structure, as I mentioned earlier, I incorporated seasons. Now we've got show segments. And we've got, sponsors. Come on, get into the bag a little bit. And so, as it relates to the namesake brand, I already kind of like spilled on that. But, I do want to say here though, like another big reason why I like strayed away from like just rebuilding this new brand, Boujee Boss Media, from scratch, separate from KhalaSimmons.com, Khala Simmons LLC, is because I knew that this would be my legacy brand. It would be something that would grow far beyond me. And that is a topic that like these namesake brands, like brands that are named after people's names, right? Their likeness. I might have to do a whole separate thing on that because it really like so much was revealed to me in that. And I found so much freedom in creating this brand because like my personal identity like isn't, obviously I'm the face of the brand, like especially right now in this moment, and people know it's my brand now, but like it's not my namesake, which it helps me to differentiate a little bit better. It helps me to like define myself outside of it, which, as I mentioned earlier, was something that I really struggled with, is like having my own identity outside of the brand, and like, posting on Instagram and like feeling bad for posting something that wasn't brand related, or, like just all those things. So anyway, like I knew that I wanted to, start this brand from scratch. And so from there, I really dove into the vision for Boujee Boss Media, or BBM as my team and I call it. And the one question I kept asking myself was, what do I want to be known for? And so I knew that I didn't want to make the same mistake of limiting my brand to titles or flaky offers. And so instead of centering the brand around what I do, I began formulating Boujee Boss Media around who I am. And it took me back to this sermon that I heard one time at my dad's church years ago. I was still in college at the time. Shout out to the Brook and Pastor Moultrie. And he was talking about, and I may like butcher it a little bit, but the sentiments of the message I know are the same. And basically he was like saying, you know, when it comes to how people would describe him or how he would describe himself, he doesn't describe himself as a pastor. He describes himself as a teacher, because, you know, when you describe yourself as a pastor, that's what you're kind of limited to. But if you describe yourself as a teacher, you can be a pastor, you can be an author, you can do like all of these other things. And so that really resonated with me, talking about this conversation of identity. And another big moment for me, I remember listening to this podcast episode with, at the time it was the Stranded Phase podcast. Now it's called Rich in Real Life. It's hosted by Jessica Hurley. She's great. And she had this guest on there. I'll have to link this episode. It was so good. And they were just talking about like coaches and consultants in like that space. And you guys know, like I used to be very deep in that space, and just, you know, they were talking about like how one-dimensional a lot of, you know, people in that space are, you know, in the swim lanes and the way that people go about running and marketing their business and such, right? And also, you know, for a lot of people, like the lack of longevity that exists, right? And so, and more so like, you know, because and this is not like a shade or a diss to like coaches or consultants or whatever, but just like how like a lot of them, they're not legacy brands, you know what I mean? Like a lot of them are wrapped up in the namesake, and like basically it kind of like creates this like hamster wheel of like constantly having to work and constantly having to follow this like one certain formula, which does not work for everyone. And you know, I started thinking about me and how I just wanted so bad to like really fit into this space. And I mean, you can tell, like, even looking at the content that I used to create, like, especially for the first like year and a half or so, like, of this podcast, like that content, y'all saw it. Like, it was something, you know, it was something. Like, it was obvious that I was trying to fit a certain mold, follow a certain formula, like, and I just wanted to be like these people so bad. And I just felt such imposter syndrome. I felt like I was just so unworthy. I felt so bad about myself. And I just really would compare my journey to theirs, which is the one thing everyone tells you should never do. And then it was like, God revealed to me, you know what I mean, that the reason why I wasn't, you know, because I had some success in this space, you know, I made some money, had some clients, whatever, but the reason why I wasn't hitting the way that I wanted to, making the type of money that I wanted to, or the impact that I wanted to, is because the vision that God had for me was far greater than the swim lanes of those that I was trying to emulate. And man, when I had that moment, that was like, it drove me crazy, y'all. Like I couldn't, I'm stuttering. That's how I felt. Like I was just like a ball of like mess, like a puddle, like, cause I felt like everything that I'd been working towards was like a lie. Cause it kind of was like, and it was just crazy. Like God literally was like, girl, your identity, it does not lie in the coaching. It does not lie in the consulting. Those are just things that you do. Who you are is a disruptive storyteller. Now, what are you going to do with that? And so that set me off. So I began to think about what I wanted BBM to offer beyond the podcast, obviously. And I was brought back to this vision that I had way back in 2018. So now almost 5 years ago. I told y'all this has been in the making for a minute. I had a vision. This was like even before I had the thought of like Boujee Boss Media, but I had this vision of like this women focused media conglomerate, like not just like a media brand, like a conglomerate, right? And that would offer digital products and merch, but the main impact would be like through the disruptive stories told, whether it's via podcasts like Boujee Boss podcast, digital media publications like The Melanin Perspective, which OGs recognize, come on, TMP gang, okay, or even original like TV and film content, which that's another little hint I'm about to drop. stay tuned. But with that clear focus in mind, I began mapping out where to start bringing this vision to reality. And so like a lot of those core visual brand assets of like BBM, you know, like I brought in Erica for that, and even like on the administrative end, like getting all of that stuff squared away, because Jesus, that's been a doozy, child. Starting a business in New York City, please keep me in your thoughts and prayers. It's a mess. And then, you know, all of the like free content offerings that I wanted to have. And so Boujee Boss podcast, Story Disrupted, which if you check out the site, you know what that's about, right? And then like the digital offers, got a course coming later this year, Disruptive Storytelling Demystified. And I mentioned, you know, I have my team now. I have Erica, Jasmine, Shanice. Shout out to you guys. You'll meet them later in the season. And so together we've spent the last 6 months creating what you are now experiencing in this very moment. So what is Boujee Boss Media? Well, we are a mass media company that produces premium entertainment and educational content for high-performing women. We are disruptive storytellers that are redefining luxury beyond materialism, but also as a state of mind and a state of being. And we are just getting started. So, introducing a new segment we have got called Boujee Bible, and essentially it's where there is a Boujee Bible verse from like the book of whatever, my name from the book of Khala, or whatever guest we have on from their book. Just, you know, obviously, you know, stemming around the topic of that day, and just really like speaking life into you guys, and something to kind of just leave you with something succinct. And this was kind of birthed based on like the question that I would always ask guests previously around like the piece of advice that they would have, you know, for women looking to optimize their own bougie boss up. And so we kind of took that and converted it into what we now know as a Boujee Bible verse. And so the Boujee Bible verse today is very simple. Timing is everything. You know, your body, your spirit, it will tell you what you need to do when you need to do it. And also that resting is just as important as working, right? Work hard, play hard, rest hard, that sort of thing. And just realizing that living and experiencing life can really inform you on your next steps and give you the clarity that you need about what you're meant to do in this world. And so really lean into rest. Like sometimes that clarity, like I've said throughout this episode, it's not going to come through like, you know, you like trying to force all of the things and trying to do all of the work and burning yourself out. Sometimes it comes from stillness. Sometimes it comes from rest. And so really lean into that. And then finally, I guess I got a few Boujee Bible verses today. What you do, it's not who you are. That's probably one of the ones that resonate most with me, right? And so those are, you know, it was a verse. It was continuous. Say it was like verse 1 through 3 or through 4 or whatever. And then I'm going to add on a fifth verse here, just because I have a team now. So the fifth verse is, don't be afraid to ask for help and ask for what you need in a very clear manner from, of course, trusted people and sources. You know, do your due diligence, do your research, but don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask, because, you know, these visions that, you know, you are given, that you are assigned, that we are assigned, it's always bigger than just us. And, you know, there's times where you can do things by yourself and where you can, you know, workshop it and DIY it. But there also comes a time, you know, especially when, you know, you're on the brink of elevation, where you need to reach out, you need to ask for help, and you need to have a supportive team around you. So those are the Boujee Bible verses today. Okay. As we close out today's episode, this has been super fun. Of course, you know, whenever you come back after a while, it's always nerve-wracking. Worrying about like the deck and just, you know, what will things flow right, especially with us now having a new flow of doing things. But I have to say that, although, you know, there are still a little bit of nerves, it feels like I'm right back at home. I missed
doing this. I missed like just exercising my creativity, and now like to be able to do it in this way and be able to level things up even more. It's so fulfilling. I so hope that you enjoyed this episode. I'm so glad to be back. I can't wait to experience this new era, this new brand, this new everything with you. Shout out to our Boujee Bop of the week. Okay, we got Keep Trying by Kim Cruz and Layla Hathaway. Shout out to you, Terrell. If you guys don't know Terrell, like on YouTube, he's another YouTuber. He's also a producer. He's a mogul in the making. I mean, really, like he's done so many things. He's known for Song Association. He took that, created another platform. He's put out like 2 albums. I highly recommend you check it out. I feel like that song is just, it's so raw, it's so real, and it's so true to my story and the story of this brand. And so shout out to that song because it done got me through. Okay, of course we gotta sign off here. So as always, stay bougie, stay bossed up, and I will catch you next week.